And we are live. So, good evening, everybody. It is October 2nd, 2025. Gosh, it feels good, but it feels weird at the same time to say October. Can't believe we have already hit the introduction of spooky season. And don't worry, just like in traditional fashion over on this channel, slowly but surely, things will start to get a little more on the spooky side as we get closer to Halloween. And I also do think the tropics are going to start to provide us with some spooky things out there. And by that, I'm not saying impacts or major hurricanes. Obviously, that's always on the table. But what I mean by that is October is going to be the wild card month, as well as an extension of that into November. Some of this stuff I want to show you tonight, I have my reasoning behind it, okay? So we'll see. But welcome to Weather Center Live. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Thursday evening. Happy Friday Eve, first Thursday of October, and I hope that the month is off to a positive start to each and every one of you out there. We are going to get started here in a moment. If you are brand new to the channel, if you're just discovering this live discussion, it would kindly mean the world to all of us if you consider hitting that subscribe button. Let's all take a second to give that like button a little nudge. I see the chat is already popping off. It's great to see everybody tonight. We'll take a second to say hello once we get some nudging to take place with that like button. Share this information with those you believe would benefit from it, and upon the conclusion of this live discussion, if you want to drop a comment in the comment section down below, let me know where it is you're tuning from. If you're watching after the fact, reach out, drop a line, say hello, ask some questions. Happy to make some time to get back to you as early as I can. Haven't been too great with answering comments recently, I know, and I'm punishing myself for it because my schedule has been so crazy. Tomorrow, I finally have a day off, even though I have a bunch of other stuff I have to do, and then we're right back to it as soon as we get to Saturday, Sunday, and so on. I've been having a lot of one days off, to tell you the truth, and that's why I've been playing catch up every single day. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Let me pop the chat out, get that puppy front and center, and in fact, I'm going to bring it over to my right-hand side. It'll be a little easier to see it in front of where my OBS Studios is, and I will move my Epic Pen to this side of the screen. Very good. All right, so I do see the chat is very lively for the surprise live discussion. We've got Atlantic. Ephraim 2006 says, hello, sir. You are doing an amazing job. Brand new to the channel. Welcome. I appreciate you smashing that like button and the hype button every time you tune in, and you're very welcome for the updates. It's a pleasure to get to talk weather with everybody. We've got a lot of OGs in the chat, too. Wazim, Yahir, Ethan, Kiera, Southern Media, LF The World, TG Herman, Justin Short, Carmen Poole, good to see you. Katya, Eliane, Hurricane Man, what's going on? Good to see you. Hopefully we're not cooked. Pam, Carmer, Southern Media, Kanoy Brown, another faithful viewer, Olivia Delval. I hope I'm saying that right, but good evening to you down in Miami. Twilight Firefly 100, April Claremont, Ann Mountain, and let's see who else. Tyler Max, Super Charles. We got a lot of the good old folks in here, and I hope we have a lot more joining us. So let's go ahead and jump in. So, National Hurricane Center's homepage. We've got a couple different things out there, one of which is right off the immediate southeast tip of the Florida Peninsula. Not too concerned about this one, to tell you the truth. Even though the GFS has the warm and fuzzy with it, I'm not very concerned about it. We'll have to wait and see. Some of our other global computer models do suggest there is going to be an attempt at a small area of low pressure trying to develop. It's perched right over top the warm Gulf Stream, and it's near South Florida, which means we're also seeing a bit more of that warmth feed from the loop current in the central and eastern Gulf. So I do think we are in a very precarious position for it to try to feed off some of the thermal energy we have down there. We're also right at the very tail end of a front. So this does have the makings of trying to become at least a very sloppy, homegrown style disturbance that's going to be a hefty rainmaker for Central Florida and South Florida for the next 3 to 5 days. You can see the narrative here as of 2 o'clock. We'll get another update at 8 p.m., 10 for 10 shot over the next 2 to 7 days. An area of low pressure may form along a remnant frontal boundary, just as we discussed seconds ago, over the northwestern Bahamas and southern Florida during the next day or two. 2. Any development is expected to be slow, and the primary reason that is if you look at the formation zone here, it's going to slowly drag its heels over Florida and then end up in the upper northeasternmost Gulf. Some ensemble iterations, especially from the DeepMind models, want to take this thing and spit it back in this direction, which would be bizarre, to tell you the truth. We've got dominant high pressure up over the Appalachians, over the mid-Atlantic, driving clockwise flow over much of the eastern United States and western Atlantic. So for this thing to want to go to the right doesn't quite add up to me. So yeah, I'm not sure. So we'll have to continue to watch that. I do have a bit of a breakdown of the hazards that we're going to see over the next few days. It does look to be a bit of a hardy weekend, a sporty weekend, especially right along the coast and for our East Coast counties from Jacksonville all the way down to the Miami-Dade area. And then this puppy out here just recently popped up yesterday. Another disturbance with the token 0 for 20 split. 0% shot over the next 48 hours, 20% chance over the next 7 days. This is a tropical wave that is going to be meandering off the coast of Africa over the next couple of days. Models are in fairly decent agreement that this will try to begin developing towards tropical storm status. The GFS is the only one kind of by itself developing a hurricane, albeit, spoiler alert, if you saw the 12Z European model today, whoosh, hold on to your butts. I'm not sure if you all saw it. I can pull it up. If you drop in the chat right now, let me know if you want me to pull up the 12Z Euro. It's a wonky run. It's a wonky run. I just want to say right now, it's basically Wilma, Irma, Ian, and Charlie all combined. Let's just put it that way. So if you want to see it, more so just for the entertainment factor on tonight's live stream, feel free to let me know in the chat, and I'll make sure to pull it up towards the backside. But this one, to tell you the truth, even though some folks in recent videos had mentioned that I'm also one of the fearmongers of YouTube, I don't know. Right now, it seems like the most likely outcome is going to be another recurving system. So right now, what we really want to pay attention to, there goes my Epic Pen doing the silliness again. Right now, the greatest area of concern with this upcoming tropical wave is going to be from Hispaniola all the way back to the east into our Lesser Antilles, particularly the Leeward Islands. Mr. Man JJ, if you're down there in the Windward Islands, you could still see some impacts from this. However, given the nature of the system and where it is it's expected to track, we'll probably be seeing more of a north and west side loaded system until obviously it tries to wrap up into a more organized feature. Whether or not it stays as an open wave, we'll have to see. But regardless, it does seem to take aim towards the Central Antilles, if not the Leeward Islands, and then try to pull north in a weakness between a negative PNA that's really going to establish itself over the eastern U.S., and then a weakness splitting the subtropical high over the Atlantic, kind of like so. Looks like a boo face right there. So, all right, let's go ahead and start getting into some of the data. And I will go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off right away and just show you what the 12Z Euro had for us today. It was a spicy run, I'll tell you. I will tell you. This is the 18Z run. I want to pull up the 18Z AI model for you all. Let me get my face out of the way, and let's take this in together. So we'll go out a few days, and there is our tropical wave in question. This guy right there. If you can see my cursor spinning around, that is the tropical wave. You can see by next Monday afternoon, we're going to be in the central main development region, riding that 10-degree latitude line. So a fairly safe tropical wave. And, you know, to tell you the truth, the pattern is in between the wave breaks. If you look, it kind of looks like we're going to get another dumping of that dry, stable air back up towards the north here, but this wave will definitely miss it, moving generally towards the west. Then, as we track it through time, you can see it starts to undergo development, lifting towards the Leeward Islands. There you go. Starting to see a little bit of action down there, and then also the Euro and the Icon are also tracking the potential for an extra piece of those frontal fragments to try to spin and do something as they progress towards southeast Florida. I'm going to pull up the Icon as well after this to see if the German model is sniffing that out once again as well. The Euro also, if you notice, I know we keep bouncing all over the chart, but bear with me here. The Euro also has our first run at a little weak gyre system right there. So the Euro has 1, 2, and 3 systems that are being monitored at least on the Euro and its associated ensembles over the next 7 days. It's still within the 7-day window, so perhaps we get another area of interest down near the Yucatan, either on the Bay of Campeche or the Western Caribbean side. That's not going to be any issue for us. It's going to be a big rainmaker. We definitely have the makings of a gyre down there already, but this one is more than likely going to be bullied towards the west. If you look, we've got that dominant high ridge up over the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the eastern United States. So the flow on the south side of it is going to be rocking out of the east. That's why we're going to have some very strong winds here in central Florida the next few days. But then watch this. This is where it gets fun, all right? Hold on to your seats. I'm not going to say the catchphrase, but I'm definitely going to say hold on, because watch what happens. The Euro essentially pummels the Leeward Islands, the U.S. British Virgin Islands, and drives that puppy right into Puerto Rico as a hurricane. Then we decide we're going to do the Irma dive through Hispaniola, through Jamaica, and then we've got a Cat 5 headed for the Yucatan Channel, just in time to be picked up by this next approaching front right there. That's why I mentioned before even pulling the spoiler off or pulling the Band-Aid off, this is like a combination of Wilma, Irma, Charlie, and Ian. Because this thing goes up, does the Irma dive down back into the Caribbean, and then decides it's going to sneak up in between the Yucatan Channel as a 930 some odd millibar major hurricane. Is this going to happen? It's doable. You know my favorite saying. Is it the most likely outcome? Not right now. Not right now, no. So that's why I wanted to ask you all if you wanted to see it, and I want to use my words lightly here. I'm not putting this out there as a prediction. I'm not saying, look out with the giant arrows, but I just thought this was fun. I thought this was an interesting run, especially how it doubled down on the path of Irma back in 2017 with the infamous curling north and then dipping back down like you're on a roller coaster ride. And this would definitely get interesting if we were to get something in the Gulf with this type of pattern, because we all know that's synonymous with kicking it back towards the north and eventually the east. It'll be very interesting to see what Zero Z shows, but my gut tells me it's going to be gone by the time we update at Zero Z. So now let's get back into reality. Let's take a live look at the tropics themselves. You can see we've got a very distorted pattern out there. This is what's left of Imelda. Imelda has now fully poofed, and believe it or not, this huge swath of ripping upper-level cloud cover that's just flying up towards the northeast Atlantic, that's what's left of Humberto. And you can see that we've got, oh boy, here we go. Let me take a sip of water. I apologize. My voice is still not at 100% for some reason. All right, there we go. Sorry. I know there was a bit of a gap there. I just had to chug some water real quick. You can see through Atlantic Canada and down the eastern seaboard, look at all this fair weather cumulus, this open cell cumulus moving down towards the south. That's high pressure. High pressure is really beginning to establish itself in the western Atlantic and then back across the eastern United States. And then there's our little AOI at the very tail end of this frontal appendage. Look at how rocking that front is through the central subtropical Atlantic. We got a nice line of deep convection right along there. Not tropical, obviously. That's the leading edge of our high pressure, but I find it very interesting that you can kind of just get a feel for the temperature gradient out there. As that feature moves towards the southeast, it's butting right up against all that maritime tropical air. Then in traditional 2025 fashion, we had a really healthy tropical wave right there. It looked really good earlier this morning. You look at the very beginning of the run, and it looked like we were developing a bit of a mid-level spin with that. But then if you notice, sneaking in the background, doing the Halloween kind of lurking, we had another trademark upper-level low. Tear it apart, so that thing's not likely to develop. The Icon had it on there for a couple of runs, and then it dissipated it. Now, one thing I also want to point out, too, before we move on from here, I know we're spending a lot of time on the infrared, but take a look down at Central America near the Yucatan. That is definitely our gyre getting going. Definitely starting to show itself. We've got some very generous thunderstorms and lots of convection going on south of Mexico, over Central America, from Panama all the way back up through El Salvador and Belize. We've got a lot of stuff going on. The Yucatan is being bathed in garden variety thunderstorms extending back into the Bay of Campeche. So you can tell we are really focusing our lift in that corner of the world. So I do think it's only a matter of time before something tries to rotate and then move off in this general fashion towards Mexico. We'll have to give it a little more time, give it a couple more days, see what happens. Taking you through the true color visible satellite shot, I want you to notice right in through there, that's our area of interest, and we're already trying to get a small piece of spinach right in there. Obviously still battling some pretty decent upper level shear because we have a trough digging down. Look at all this open and closed cell cumulus moving through here, coming right across Bermuda. They're finally seeing strong northerly winds, but they got much better weather than when Imelda had passed just barely to the north of that area. And that's what's going to help to drive up our rain chances. Look at how we're just getting pummeled through the state of Florida and then down through South Carolina, portions of Georgia, how we're getting wrecked by that very strong easterly gradient. We've got low pressure trying to establish itself down here. We've got high pressure really kicking towards the north. So we are just creating a bit of a wind tunnel right through that area. And that's what's going to give us that consistent feed of moisture as this frontal boundary tries to back build or retrograde towards the north. That's going to be the area that we watch, and then as this area continues off towards the southeast, some of our models are latching on to maybe a little bit of percolation in the pattern back here before riding the southern base of that high pressure back through the Bahamas and towards South Florida. Okay, so lots of information there, lots of satellite analysis. Here is the outlook from National Weather Service. I wanted them to break it down for you. If you look, we've got the high rain chances. We've got flood watches through all of our East Coast counties from Volusia all the way down to beyond my typical viewing area, south of Brevard, through Vero Beach, Fort Pierce, down to Stewart, Okeechobee County. Everyone there is under a flood watch for very hefty rainfall totals. You can see just through the day today and into tomorrow, they're forecasting anywhere between 1 to 3 inches potentially, with maximum of 4, if not greater, in some localized areas. We're also going to be seeing those ripping winds coming in right along the coast. The gradient or the flow of the wind is perpendicular to the coastline of Florida, so the seas are going to be choppy. There's going to be high surf. Rip currents are going to be lethal if you decide to wander into the water for whatever reason. I'm just saying, we're Floridians, so obviously a lot of us have thick skin. But just be careful. Look in the bottom right-hand corner there. It has the hazardous coastal conditions with the breaking waves, wave breaking. I'm having PTSD from all the harsh conditions in the Atlantic. 5 to 8 foot surf, high risk of rip currents in the rough seas. Moderate beach erosion is also potential as well because of the fact we're going to get these consistent sustained winds with stronger gusts. So especially during high tide, that could be an issue for coastal erosion for some of our counties and our locals down in that area. Now, looking at our NOAA blend of models, I have it already fast-forwarded out till Tuesday because I think Tuesday is when we'll slowly start to back out of this current setup. And if you look all the way up to southeast Georgia down to Miami, on average, we're looking at between 4 to 6 inches of rainfall. That's why we've got the flood watch in effect. It's kind of interesting to see the gradient, how the terrain really influences the rainfall that we're going to see. That's why I'm fully in belief this is not going to be a severe weather setup. This is definitely going to be more of a flood, heavy rain deluge type setup. Because if you notice, you can see how as this continues from east to west, because we're interacting with more stable conditions over the peninsula of Florida, and then the further west you go, you can see that rain band really breaks down once you go beyond, we'll use my viewing area as an example, from beyond Volusia, Northern Lake, and into Marion counties. You see that really steep gradient between 5 inches for portions of Volusia County, down to about 1 inch as you get into interior Marion County. So we're going to be seeing a lot of water piling up over the span of 3 to 5 days. So we got to watch that. That's going to be the primary concern with this, with maybe occasional tropical depression, if not tropical storm force winds, as that low pressure tries to kind of consolidate a little bit more. Okay, so now looking ahead, this is a healthy signal. The Euro and its associated ensembles have been trending towards this for a while now. You could see that it is just about CAG time. If I've ever seen a signal for a Central American gyre to try to really force itself into the fray, it's coming. Today's the 2nd of October. By about the 7th, take notes, please. I mentioned this in my update on Tuesday. If you have the opportunity to do so, take a little note, put it on a sticky note, or put it in your phone or something. Especially for my Gulf Coast folks and anyone watching from the Caribbean, make a note of this. By about October 7th, I think we're going to start to see the makings of the gyre. And then between the 12th to about the 15th, maybe out till about the 17th, we're going to start to see more of a bona fide storm signal. Remember, the gyre in of itself is just a disruption in our overall flow over Central America. It's a huge turning of counterclockwise winds from about central Mexico all the way down to the Panama Canal, we'll say, as a landmark. It just spins. And as it captures energy, they get roped into that focused area of rising motions. You got a lot of moisture, you got a lot of lift, so what tends to happen? You get little embedded spins that turn into tropical features. It works even better if you have a meandering tropical wave that finds its way in there. It really exploits that focused, favorable setup. And you can see here, this is probably one of our more enhanced passes of the MJO that we've seen for pretty much all through the season. This is probably one of the better looks we've seen since the start of the hurricane season. You see that big old pulse really showing itself for portions of the Gulf, the Eastern Pacific, and the Caribbean right after the 9th of October all the way down through the 17th. And it holds steady from there as well, with a solid sign on the left-hand side of the chart, if you look, for potential easterly waves still coming off of Africa. So it's going to be a very interesting setup. This is part of the reason why I think that October is our wild card. And if you take a look at our latest, this is valid for today, the latest control member from the 46-day ensemble output, you can see there's that huge pocket of enhanced activity that could possibly show itself in the midsections of October, kind of tapering off just as we approach Halloween. We go into a very, very brief sinking phase in terms of our MJO, and then bam, right back into it, right after Halloween. Into November, showing another favorable passing of the MJO. So this kind of brings me back to that thermodynamic theory that I had back during the month of September, that perhaps because of all the excessive heat that's built up over the North Pacific and what we're still trying to get rid of and disperse from 2023 and 2024, the upper latitudes and the poles, the mid-latitudes and the poles were a little warm. As we come out of summer and head towards fall, and you take into the equation the tilt of the Earth and our orbit around the sun, we're going to start to see less and less of that direct solar radiation, warming the upper layers of the atmosphere higher up to the north. So we're going to focus more of that down towards the tropics, and maybe that's why we're starting to see a bit more of propagation of our MJO now, because we're finally getting that dome of warm water to break down just a bit in the North Pacific. We're still seeing festering La Nina conditions trying to establish itself in the tropical Pacific, and we still have that really nice warm ribbon from the Gulf all the way back through to Western Africa. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. The GFS is definitely still percolating with the idea of stuff popping off between the mid and latter portions of October. This is weird, to tell you the truth, because usually the GFS ensembles, especially the velocity anomalies, love to kiss up to the Eastern Pacific. It loves the East Pac. The Central and East Pacific, it'll pop out major hurricanes every single day if it really could. But it's in this case, I find it very interesting that the GFS is really showing an enhanced pulse of action right around the 12th through the 17th of October, with maybe a little bit of an extension just beyond that. So again, I really do think we should take note of that. The 18Z GFS kind of shows that a little bit as well. So do the European ensembles, which we'll get into right about now if I can find my cursor again. So we have all of our models singing in tune from all the way up in the highest portions of the atmosphere down to the surface. Here's a look at our tropical probabilities for the next 10 days. You can see that first wave out there, definitely starting to see a healthier signature of development. That will be our next named storm, more than likely. We got Jerry on tail, for my Seinfeld fans out there. And then a very weak signature of that feature that's going to try to wander over Florida. And then that second one down there that's in the western Bahamas at about 168 hours out. Notice you get another little bubble of anomalies down there, and then look in the Bay of Campeche as well, that feature here. That's the initial makings, I believe, of the gyre as our next tropical waves move towards the Lesser Antilles. And then finally, check this out. As we go past day 10, out to day 12, and then to day 15, look in the Western Caribbean. This signal has been trending the last couple of days. And notice how we're getting closer to the 15th to the 17th, right inside that window between the 12th and the 17th. I really do think, and it would behoove you to check back with me or any other reliable weather source. I always tell you all that as well. If it's not me, just make sure it's someone reliable. Make sure it's somebody that you can trust. So I really do think my gut has been talking to me since the start of the hurricane season and since the beginning of the year. I found the live stream where I verbatim said that October we're probably going to have a big spooky season storm. Period. And day by day, even though the models are still acting a little funky, it seems like that gut instinct is getting closer and closer to verifying. 12Z Euro definitely showed something like that this afternoon, and now we have the GFS also showing similar makings of it. We'll have to give it a little more time. I'm not confident right now, to tell you the truth, with as many times we've been burned this hurricane season. As exciting as it may sound, I'm not very confident just yet. I want to see signals stick. I want to see signals remain consistent and trend and trend and trend, especially since today is only the 2nd, and I'm over here spoon-feeding you the 12th through the 17th. It's still a ways away. There's a lot that can change, but based on the overarching setup, I feel like realistically, it could be game time. We'll see. So as you can see on our Euro ensembles, there you go. You can see that initial tropical wave screaming across the MDR, headed for the Lesser Antilles. And again, I want to mention that that's where I want to emphasize the most real time. In the short term, within the next 5 to 7 days, it's down there. We'll have to be watching for another system that's going to either try to enter the Caribbean or scrape through the Leeward Islands as it gets ready to turn towards the north. I really don't have any confidence that this is going to make it west. Could we see it? Yes. However, not the most likely solution, at least in my opinion, just not the most likely outcome. But then I will go ahead and doodle in where I want you to pay attention to, because this chart is going to start to look like a kindergartner got a hold of some crayons and started to just draw everywhere. Watch down in here, please. Right now, the current chart is out to October 10th. Let me fast forward to about the 12th. Watch down in that corner of the world. I know it's not Christmas yet, but do you see what I see? That's looking a little gyre-ish. Definitely looking a little on the sinister side. It's one thing to have some noisy members, and when I say noisy members, I mean just your usual, because of the time of the year, climatology, you get 1 or 2 members to sneak up out of there. But that's a fairly robust signal, and it has been that way for the last few days. I'll show you the 0Z run just as backup to support my theory. You look at the 0Z run from earlier this morning at about 2 o'clock in the morning. You go all the way out, still there. And in fact, I'd argue a bit of an uptrend between then and now. If you go to 12 Zulu yesterday, kind of the same thing. You can see it slowly beginning to build up that momentum right around that same time frame. So if I had to lock in and tell you that when it is we truly need to pay attention, it would probably be starting at about the 12th out to about the 17th. So that's going to be my bullseye. That's going to be what I'm targeting there. I was looking at the GFS, and I know this is the happy hour run, but again, what I want to point out to you is not necessarily the individual storm and where it is. I want you to look at the top of the page here and look at the time frame. That's what I really want you to focus on, is the time frame. The time frame. So let me go ahead and draw my marker up there one last time. And I will go ahead and rewind. And I want you to, as I kind of walk you through it like an audiobook, I want you to not take your eyes off that time if you could be so kind. So let's go back. There's the 12th. This is 0Z on the 12th. You go out to the 13th. Notice that gyre is really starting to spin up. You can see the overall flow is there big time. You've got northeasterly winds to the Gulf, and you've got southwesterly winds out in the eastern Pacific. That is a bona fide gyre right around the 12th. You go out to the 14th, gyre begins to intensify. You go out to the 15th, we begin to see low pressure. You go out to the 16th, tropical storm begins to form. You go out to the 17th, and we've got a hurricane down there. So Some of you will disagree. Some of you have voted the season off, and I'm okay with that. I've come very close to voting this season off. I've had many instances where I'm losing sleep in the morning, looking at models, trying to prepare for another briefing to come to you all and give you some viable information, and I'm a little burnt. Every tropical wave that we've had has curved out to sea. Every tropical wave we've had, regardless of where it's developed, has done the exact same thing. And it's not that I'm voting for impacts. It's not that I'm voting for people to get hit by storms. As a forecaster, I want to stretch my legs as a forecaster. I want to actually forecast. I don't want to come on here and do the classic, this could get a little interesting. We got to watch for these westward shifts, and oh man, it's coming in. I don't want to do that, especially if I know 9 times out of 10, it's going to move west and then it's going to curve north. In this case, though, looking at trends and just having looked at the patterns, the pattern recognition experience that I have, not only during my time from Air Force weather as a synoptician, but especially having really heavily gotten into the weeds with the tropics since 2022 up to this point, I know when the gyre is going to start to show itself. You can recognize when those patterns are going to begin to develop, and you can kind of decipher the difference between, for example, the GFS just spitting stuff out just for fun. Because again, like I mentioned several videos ago, because of those velocity anomalies and how excessively favorable the upper levels are painted on the GFS, we're going to see some very crazy runs. I'm not taking away from that. There's still going to be a lot of GFS sillies and clickbait that we can post because the GFS is going to do some abnormal things. But I do think if I had to suggest a more realistic signature that we may want to watch for, it's probably this one. It's going to go... Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. It's going to go back and forth. The gyre is always the most difficult. Sorry about that. Like I said, my voice. The gyre is always the most difficult phenomena to forecast during a hurricane season, let alone the fact at this portion of the hurricane season, because like with Helene and with Milton of last year, you tend to get a mashing up of different sources. Milton, albeit an anomaly, not saying Milton's going to happen again, but I'm using it as a hypothetical example of why it's so tricky to forecast. You had the gyre. You had the pass of the MJO, that's 2 pieces. You had Tropical Depression number 11 in the Eastern Pacific, 3 pieces. Our precursor rain event that occurred in the Gulf that models first latched onto, that's 4 pieces. And a meandering tropical wave that managed to make it through the Caribbean into the Bay of Campeche, that's 5 pieces. And then we also had an upper trough coming down to help push it together like a potato masher. That's 6 different moving pieces from different parts of that region. So it's very difficult for models to latch on to this stuff. That may not be the end-all solution. May just be another instance of some Bay of Campeche slop popping in there and then plowing into Mexico or trying to curve back up towards Texas. Does the pattern suggest that? Not really, especially as you go deeper into October and we get that big old trough over the eastern United States. That definitely is something that you want to watch out for, and I'll show you that right now. I'll go over to the 700 millibars. We'll go to 500 millibars. Bam, look at that big old trough extending down over the eastern United States. So that would be your escape route right there. All your lowering heights right in through here. We've really weakened the subtropical high over the Atlantic, and yeah. And that is typically, historically speaking, what happens with most of our October and November systems. They either go up to the north or sometimes, in the case of Wrong Way Lenny, you get really strong troughs and fronts to sneak down into the upper Caribbean, and it bullies them back to the east. So it's not an outlandish, solution to follow through with. Now, as we get ready to close out and I get ready to open the floor to questions, I just want to see what the 18Z AI model has. It's brand spanking new. It came out during the stream, probably came out about 20 minutes ago. I just want to see what these models are doing. And we'll all take this in together. So the AI model does, in fact, develop our next system, and there you go. You can see it's starting to recurve. Oh, and then look at that. Does have the early makings of our gyre down there right around the same time. So there goes our next system. Doesn't quite do too much with that lead frontal fragment that's in the Bahamas right now, but it does show a developing tropical storm at the minimum moving through the Leeward Islands towards Puerto Rico before catching a ride on that upper low that comes down over the east coast. And then notice we really start to see that gyre right there. So... And then look at the time. Still lines up. That's what I call consistency. And one thing I also want to mention to you all, especially if you follow other channels, you got to remember when I talk gyre and when the reliable sources talk gyre, we're not talking major hurricanes and tropical systems. I want to emphasize that to you. The gyre is your overall wind flow. And what you can see here with all these dark milky shades of grays and blacks and greens, that's the setup. That's the gyre. That's that counterclockwise flow you look for down in the low levels. And I'm pretty sure if I hold the clock right here and switch us to our upper level winds, we'll go to 200 millibar winds. We're going to see a giant anticyclone. We're going to go from counterclockwise to clockwise in 3, 2, 1. And there you go. You got your trademark northwesterly wind coming in across the northwest quadrant of this area. You can see down in through here. And then there is your emphasized focused lift right there coming out of the Western Caribbean. So actually, you could almost make a case that even though the Euro AI doesn't have anything stamped there as a developing feature, it's also showing that in the Western Caribbean, we will create a bit of that vacuum effect. We've got that East Coast trough helping to kind of siphon more of the air out of that area. And then we also have the upper level velocities moving through. And so as a result, yeah, look at that. There it is. You can see even better when you look at the deep layer winds. So, you know, once again, I'm not looking for an individual storm. Models are going to be crazy trying to produce something like that. We've seen it all the time. I mean, again, last year, remember, Helene was here, Helene was here, Helene was there, Helene was in the East Pack, Helene was over here, Helene was over there. Milton, we first latched on to a thing that was back over here, and then Milton didn't suddenly spark up until all of a sudden a moment's notice in the Bay of Campeche. So when I look for the gyre, I'm not necessarily looking for storms this far out. It's going to be tricky for that. But what I'm looking for is this, the vacuum to suggest that we're going to see conditions ripen up. That's what the gyre is for all intents and purposes. Let's take a look at what the Euro has for 18Z, just for shoots and giggles. Before I open up the floor for questions, I just want to see what we've got on the European model in terms of just our short-range forecast. Okay, so the Euro does have couple different things going on here. We've got a little bit of a frontal fragment here that's going to be spinning some rain up towards the Gulf Coast of Texas, Louisiana. There's our current AOI. You can see that early making of a gyre down there spinning around in our mid-level vorticity. Oh, look at that. A little bit, you know, just a hair of an uptrend with that feature that could be headed towards Florida. And then there goes our gyre system down there in the Bay of Campeche, kind of a bit of a weakening trend. It looks like we're focusing it more in the Eastern Pacific now, on this model run anyways. And then in the Atlantic, there's our tropical wave, headed towards the Lesser Antilles by about next Wednesday, kind of approaching the Lesser Antilles. Looks a little bit weaker this run, yes, a little bit weaker and more towards the south on this run. So the weaker it is, the more likely it's going to enter the Caribbean full force and then maybe try to develop before escaping towards the north. AI ensembles are not in just yet. Let's take a look at the GFS ensembles, and then I promise I'll open up the floor to questions. I just want to go out to that date and time. It's a pretty hearty signal down there. All right. So something's definitely coming, that's for sure. Something's definitely going to be showing itself, and I think it's only a matter of time before down there near the Yucatan Peninsula, we're going to have a yellow AOI. I really do think it's only a matter of time. We'll just have to give it another 3 to 5 days and see what the models decide to do with that, and maybe they're still also playing catch-up with how favorable it could be, or maybe we'll see them back down and it won't be as favorable as models have been suggesting, you know? There's still a lot of wiggle room for some error down there, but the signs are promising. And there we go. We will go ahead and open up the questions now. Let me go ahead and bring the chat. I'll put the chat right in front of me since I don't have my screen pulled up. April Claremont asks, right away I see my name highlighted, what do you think about November for storms? Since weather patterns have changed over the years and hurricane hurricane season seems to be going later in September to October, I think, especially looking at our anomalies, maybe not a full repeat of what happened last year with a major hurricane or two down there with Oscar, Nadine, Raphael, and Sarah popping off back to back, but I don't think we want to take our foot off the throttle. I think the fact that we're looking at another potential pass of the MJO into early and middle November, we could have an early November system or two that we want to track down there. Based on what I see in the models right now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but we've got an easy 3 to 6 more named storms through the month of October. Easily. Now, it's a matter of if they exploit the favorable conditions when they can, and if the luck of the draw, with the wave breaking, the upper lows, and the pockets of shear. We'll have to see if they can actually take full advantage. Critty J847-841 asks, do you believe in a CAG storm forming in mid-late October just because how favorable the environment could be according to the models? Critty, yes, I do. We just have to really drill down exactly where and precisely when that's going to happen, but I do think between the 12th and the 17th is when we are most favorable and ready to pop something out of there. Victor asks, in your opinion and with your experience, do you think Florida can still get hit? Yes. Yes. Oh yeah, big time. Truthfully, we've had a lot of big landfalling hurricanes in the month of October, and some could argue that Helene and Ian could be kind of roped into that as well, especially Ian, because Ian was a September 28th storm right on the cusp of October. Do you think Jamaica, Sony asks, do you think Jamaica will get a direct hit this hurricane season? That's going to be tough to forecast. Based off of the 12Z Euro alone, I wouldn't think so. I'm not confident in saying that. How many storms can form from the gyre, Scott Patton asks. It truly depends. We've had cases like last year, for example, where one singular gyre event can push different systems out of that area. Francine, Helene, and Milton were all gyre systems, believe it or not, throughout the same general time frame. We had a very similar setup to what's on our way right now, or what's on its way right now, and we managed to pop off multiple systems. Alberto and Chris early last year were also the result of the gyre. And yes, James, to tell you the truth, yes, Louisiana is still vulnerable. Still vulnerable. Because if anything last year taught us a lesson was there is still the potential of a negative Pacific North American oscillation to form up with a big old dominant ridge of high pressure over the east United States and then troughing remaining back over the Rockies, which could draw a system from Central America north and back to the west as opposed to that trademark north and then east towards Florida or the southeast. Oh yeah, Tyler Mack. Maybe not Wilma, because Wilma is still the heavyweight champion of the lowest central pressure for the month of October in the Caribbean. But if you all recall, back in 2018, for example, we had Michael, another iconic Category 5 gyre hurricane that came to be in the month of October. So it's very doable. It's a very doable outcome. It really is. I mean, last year we had a Cat 5 Milton from the gyre. We had a Cat 5 in the form of Hurricane Michael. We had a Cat 4 in the form of Hurricane Helene. We had a Cat 4 in the form of Idalia back in 2023. So it's a very doable solution. It's just a matter of deciphering whether it's the most likely outcome. And agreed with Critty J841 does say October can be just as bad, if not worse, than August and September. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, Sony, you're very welcome. All right, does anybody else have any questions? 2 more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and cut the stream. I have 200-some-odd people watching right now. If you could be so kind as to get that like button nudged, that'd be great. So, George, a wonderful question. I would say no. Now, granted, we could see more tornadoes during the winter and especially spring And I should say, honestly, coming up here in the next month or two as we get ready for the fall section of tornado season. But during a La Nina, with the orientation of the jet and where your mid and upper level flow is, you typically tend to focus your tornado outbreaks and your severe weather occurrences to Dixie Alley, the Texarkana area, and then back up through the lower Midwest, kind of the heart of Tornado Alley. But I've noticed, especially looking at last year when we were in the weak La Nina setup with a lot of the heat still built up in certain areas, it seemed like most of Louisiana, upper Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, kind of the immediate east of where Tornado Alley truthfully is where we saw a lot of our tornadoes. Now, granted, obviously, we still saw some action in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, but I noticed some of the more big outbreaks tend to really unfold towards the Midwest and the Mississippi Valley, if you will. Oh, Claire, welcome in first off, and then Puerto Rico, you want to watch the progression of this next tropical wave. The models are definitely showing Puerto Rico as a spot to monitor for the westward movement before this system tries to curve up and out. All right. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting the live stream, and I will go ahead and talk to you all again soon. I went over time like I always do. Like I always do. I wanted to do this about 30, 35 minutes, and we're at 45 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and cut myself off now. If not, we'll be talking for the rest of the evening, which, I mean, I'm okay with, but I got to make sure whatever the heck is still dorking up my voice, I got to make sure it's good to go, especially if things do start to kick off. So thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. You've been a fantastic audience, as always. I love this community, arguably the best weather community on the YouTubes. I will argue that tooth and nail. I don't care how small this channel is, how big the competitor is. I think our community, because we're a smaller, more intimate group, is just the best. The camaraderie, the communication, the conversation is so wholesome. I live for it, and it's always amazing, and it's always a nice way to end the day, because I always enjoy talking weather with you all, getting it all out on the table, and then seeing the comments, having a conversation, and then we'll all ride off into the sunset, or the night, I should say, which, by the way, we're going to start losing daylight. Since we're getting deeper into the fall time now, the days are going to start to get a little shorter, which I'm all for. I got to dust off a certain mask in my closet behind the camera. I got to dust off a certain mask and dust off the shoulders of a set of coveralls and kind of loosen up a little bit and embrace the spooky season. Gosh, this is one of my favorite. I love a good hurricane, but this is my favorite time of the year. Favorite time of the year. We're rocking into Halloween, blasting the Halloween theme, and then we got Thanksgiving, we got cooler weather, hurricane season is over with, and then we got Christmas, New Year's. It's just, gosh, I can feel the chills and the goosebumps. This is just the best time of the year. Best time of the year. I don't know if you all agree. I know we've got a lot of summer lovers out there or spring lovers, but I don't know. Something about fall just does it for me. And then into the winter. So we'll see what's in store for us for the rest of the month. You can count on the Weather Center to get you all the reliable, accurate, and timely information that you need to make the right decisions to keep your property and your loved ones safe. We'll talk to you again very soon. I may do another tropical weather update tomorrow. We shall see what the models have in store. And until next time, have a beautiful rest of your Thursday night. We'll talk to you again soon, but until then, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.